Fantastic, Amelia, and it's great to be able to present to everyone today and really take Microsoft Inspire, which is traditionally a 2-day event with over 450 sessions, and be able to distill that down into bite-sized chunk. So what we've done is actually look at what the key announcements are that have come through Microsoft Inspire and really break them down about where we think they're going to have the biggest impact and where organisations need to start to think about making their IT investments based on this future roadmap. So Microsoft traditionally used large conferences, whether that's Inspire, whether that's Ignite, to not only deliver a broad message out into the marketplace, but also to be able to release product roadmaps, but also updates on some of the key features and capability that are coming down. So what we're going to do is spend the next 45 minutes or so breaking that down so that you can take some actionable insights away from all of those key messages and apply them directly into your own environment. You'll see that you've got the Q&A there, so feel free to ask questions as we go along today, because I think the most important thing is that you get value out of the investment of your time. So we're happy to dive down any rabbit holes and explore anything as we start to then deliver today's session there. So as Amelia said, my name's Peter Ward. I'm the Chief Solution Architect for MOQdigital and really responsible for helping organisations unlock the value of their technology investments, enabling them to be able to then continue to accelerate their digital transformation journey. For those that aren't familiar with MOQdigital, we're 100% Microsoft focused. So we believe that there's one hyperscale cloud in the marketplace, and that's Microsoft Azure. And as a result, we have deep expertise in that space there. We see ourselves as a safe pair of hands. We've got over 13 gold competencies from Microsoft. We've got 4 advanced specializations, but we also have a broad geographical focus as well. So a truly national practice delivering solutions, not only on the East Coast, but also over in WA with the recent acquisition of Dinks, increasing our local headcount in WA to over 30 people there, bringing us now into over 400 people across the entire organisation there. We've got deep expertise across a number of key core verticals, but really our expertise we break up from a go-to-market perspective across our cybersecurity practice, our foundational services practice, as well as our digital services practice there, helping organisations to really start to accelerate that digital transformation journey. And you'll see that as a common theme as we go through a number of the announcements that were made as part of Microsoft event. It was really focused around how organisations can start to take their existing business processes, how they can start to digitise that and really be able to enable them to do more with less. But I think it's worth exploring just some of the key themes that we're seeing. And these themes are continuing to then come through the way that we're thinking about IT as an investment, but also how IT is then an enabler to start to then continue to unlock value for organisations. And I think one of the biggest changes that we're starting to see is really this ubiquitous of decentralised computing. The traditional data center, where everything was servers and storage and everything was all centralized, is becoming actually turned up on its head. And that was a move from the traditional on-premise data center to a partner data center or a private cloud, and now then full public cloud. But we're actually moving more and more that compute is closer to the edge. So rather than being centralized in a central data center, it's being moved that compute resource so that we can have that computational power to enable things like machine learning, cognitive insights as close to the possible. So as data is coming in real time, whether that's from a sensor or whether that's from another resource, we're able to process that directly on the edge and then take what's of value and send that back centrally. So we're really starting to see a massive change and a massive shift around edge computing. And you'll hear more and more of this term of intelligence being on the edge there. And that describes that capability of having compute anywhere that it's required. The other thing that we're starting to see more and more is around sovereignty of data. And Microsoft Azure is really the leader in this space, having more data centers than any other cloud provider, but also understanding the challenges of data and the gravity associated with that. As more and more organisations actually move to the sovereignty of data and regulating where that needs to reside, you need a cloud that's able to then support that, whether that's regulation from the EU, whether that's regulation then from even specific nations as well, being able to then go and support that and having all of that capability directly there. What we've seen over the last number of years is a move to more and more creators. We've seen massive disruption in the workforce occurring as a result of the pandemic, and that's introduced more and more individuals that are working for themselves, but it's also this massive rate of change. Whenever there's an economic disruption that occurs in the world throughout history, that's typically when the fastest evolution of new industry and new development occurs as individual creators start to be able to explore ideas and really start to then bring that embodiment of being able to start your own business and being able to develop and be able to sell to anybody. So really the empowerment of everybody, and we're seeing this more and more with the low-code platform and the capability that Power Platform does to really make anybody a developer. There's some recent articles that I've been reading where they believe that over 250 million new applications will be created in the next 3 years. And a lot of that's being empowered by individual creators rather than traditional IT teams. And how do we go about supporting and managing that becomes the next challenge that we need to start to be thinking about. And that similar point that we spoke about around the changes that are driven by recent economic factors are really providing opportunity for everybody, but it's also changing the way that the workforce works. We no longer necessarily have to have a centralised workforce that goes into an office, into a CBD location. All of a sudden, it opens up a global workforce and team members that are able to then interact effectively no matter where they are. But you can't pick up any of the trade press or even actually any of the popular press at the moment without seeing all of the challenges that cybersecurity starts to provide. And you'll start to see with some of the supply chain attacks, as well as a number of the other attack vectors that have been exploited, is that trust by design. So making sure that trust is built in from the ground up. You know, we often hear about this concept of zero trust when it comes to security, but really it's about thinking about making security easy and make it easy to trust and identify who an individual is. And a lot of that comes through from starting at the very basics with identity management and being able to then securely understand who somebody is and being able to then have trust to be able to then interact with that individual. But if we think about what's happening though across the year and really start to overlay what's happening inside of the technology state and that force that's really driving that, we often really need to start to think about that business focus, because IT is an enabler to allow organisations to be able to achieve more. It's really a game changer that allows them to transform the way that they're delivering their operations. But over the last 18 months from the pandemic, it's really actually become that necessity for organisations to then continue to thrive and be able to easily adopt their operations in an agile world. We're now in a world of constant change and constant state of flux, and IT is the ability to then respond quickly and deliver that capability. So one of the things that businesses are really starting to focus on is how they go about connecting their customers to grow their business. So understanding the customer, understanding their needs, and being able to have that information at the fingertips to be able to then respond. Whether that's delivering e-commerce solutions to be able to then change the distribution model for retail businesses, whether it's evolving and developing new products. So whether it's a gin factory that all of a sudden starts to go and transform and make hand sanitizer, really being able to then rapidly understand and know the customer base to be able to then rapidly develop and then bring products that meet the market needs. But the other key piece is around staff. especially in areas such as Australia, where borders are very restrictive at the moment. There's a finite amount of talent pools that everybody's fighting over, whether that's a solution implementer, whether that's a large corporate. That talent pool is being drained as a result of not having then any people from overseas. But it's also then the rapid development of digital transformation that's making it harder and harder. So one of the key things is, how do we go and keep people engaged no matter where they are? So whether they're actually in the workplace, whether they're working from home, whether they're working from a spare bedroom, or whether they're working from a cafe, creating a seamless, ubiquitous experience so that hybrid and remote work all simply become one mechanism, and really focusing on how we can drive outcomes by creating this new work environment. The other one, as we've spoken about already, is that cybersecurity threat, and this is top of mind for organisations. How do they go about keeping those assets safe? How do they make sure that their service is not interrupted as a result of ransomware? And how do they make sure that the data that their customers provide with them through that level of trust is then being maintained and looked after? And that agility, the ability to rapidly respond and go after new opportunities, whether that's a restaurant that's now moving to then online capability with Providor, a brand new meal delivery service specifically designed for high-end restaurants, being able to see an opportunity and rapidly go after that and take advantage of that. So although the meal delivery area is a crowded marketplace, being able to carve out individual niches and being able to do that very rapidly. But also in this time of uncertainty, how to manage cost. And this cost management is really a constant front of mind for many organisations, especially as we move from a traditional CapEx style model for IT investment and we move more to an OpEx model. All of a sudden, that 3-year cycle of paying for something up front and then not having to worry about it for 3 years, we're now seeing a bill every single month, and making sure that that value conversation is being driven and maintaining that value. But it's also a change in the way that IT looks after then infrastructure as well. In a traditional data center, you wouldn't power off a server over the weekend. However, when we start to move to a consumption model where it's pay for use, turning off resources makes sense because you only want to pay for what you use in that environment there. So definitely a massive paradigm shift about how to manage costs. And what we're seeing is that not all managed service providers are able to then meet that new paradigm. But where we're seeing the spend increase over FY22, some of this data has come out of a recent Forrester report, but also through the data that we've seen over the last couple of weeks with a number of Microsoft announcements about where tech spend is going to be focused there. So the interesting thing is that organisations are going to continue to actually increase their technology spend. But the reality is that few organisations want to pay for ongoing operating costs and BAU. Where the investment is being made is being able to actually what I call move the needle forward. How do we bring new capabilities to the table to then go and accelerate business change? And you'll see through these 4 key core areas of main investment where organisations are looking to then invest that money. The first of those is around cloud infrastructure. So taking that existing on-prem infrastructure and being able to transform that. You know, once something becomes end of life, not renewing that existing infrastructure and transforming that to a PaaS, pay-as-you-go style service there. Collaboration tools, and if you think about what the business challenges are about creating that ubiquity of connectivity and that hybrid workspace so that no matter whether somebody's remote or in person, they have a similar experience, collaboration tools becomes key to that. Whether that's at the cutting edge with HoloLens, being able to create a mixed reality experience, to be able to then have a Teams meeting room that allows then easy interactivity through everybody inside of the organisation and creating that seamless connectivity. Cybersecurity protection, but also one of the interesting ones is the increased spend in the typically those monolithic systems, those large systems such as your ERP, CRM systems and HRIS. Typically, these are often seen as a boat anchor for organisations, then large multi-million dollar, multi-year projects to then implement, and they take a long time to then transition out. But often these systems aren't designed to be able to rapidly respond to the needs of an organisation. As we start to move into a low-code environment where people want to be able to tap into APIs and make it easy to be able to connect all of these different systems together, it becomes more and more difficult. There's a technical debt that organisations are carrying that almost is like a boat anchor that's slowing them down and stopping them being able to accelerate that digital transformation. So we're seeing rapid movement, then moving from the traditional on-prem systems and moving more and more to SaaS-based systems that deliver that specific capability, but also enable interconnectivity, moving to a best of breed model. So picking the right system that delivers that specific capability and then being able to then interconnect across a number of different platforms. But one of the things we're seeing is around the challenges that IT organisations are facing. And these are across the board. And this is really how to then solve that business context, but also then thinking about the challenges that are unblocking it. And we want to look at these challenges as we start to look through a technology investment, because technology is designed to solve business challenges. And really one of the big things when I'm talking to a lot of IT executives is these are the things that are also keeping them up at night. Ensuring application performance. The way that applications work and operate now has changed significantly. Just simply the way we work. People are waking up earlier in the morning, logging on, doing a couple of hours of work, checking out, having breakfast with the family, potentially taking the kids to school, depending on whether there's a lockdown or not, and then coming back on and logging back on at 10 a.m. People are then also working later into the night as we move more and more to flexible working. So there are traditional maintenance activities that a lot of systems and applications are used to have changed. And it's how do we make sure that we ensure that performance no matter when somebody's interacting with those core systems. The other thing that we're still seeing is a lot of change around how organisations are moving different pricing models, especially as they're moving more and more towards a PAYG or consumption-based pricing, understanding what that means and how to do the cost recovery or how to even do the show back for those costs. The other thing is justifying the return on investment. So how to then go and take that spend that's been applied from an IT asset or an IT project and ensuring that it's delivering true business value. But the other thing is that having the right skills, but also having the right skills that are actually able to keep up with the modern cloud cadence. It was easy when we released products every 3 years and there was a box product that for people to get up to speed and they could take their time. However, with the cloud cadence, new and new features and capability are moving faster and faster. So how do you keep up? But what's really driving this? So we've spoken about what's happening from a business perspective. We've spoken about what's happening in a broad IT landscape perspective. But really what's underpinning this is this concept of digital transformation. Now, digital transformation is not something new. It's something that organisations have been doing for many, many years as they start to look at continual business improvement. How do they take an existing business process and make that more efficient? We're just now able to do it faster than ever before through the ability of us being able to then digitalise process. Whether that's through workflow, whether that's through a system, whether that's through a low-code application. The ability for us to then accelerate that has never been faster than ever. And really that digital transformation, I talk about my father and I talk about this cadence that we're starting to see. Satya Nadella and a number of other IT leaders have spoken about what the pandemic has meant for digital transformation. You often hear the phrase that there was 2 years of digital transformation in a 2-week period in late March, early April last year. That rapid rate. But if you look back through history, there's a lot that you can learn as we start to then think about that. My father, when he left school, actually worked for Metro Ford, so a Ford dealership in the CBD of Brisbane. When he left school at 15, he started in the spare parts department. When he retired at 65, he was still in that same spare parts department there. But he talks about the existing business process when he started on day one. There was an in tray on his desk and an out tray on his desk. His in tray would be piled high of paperwork. So he'd start the day, take the first piece of paper off the top of there. He would walk through that process, and then once he'd completed it, put in the out tray. There would then be someone that would come through with a trolley that would take my father's out tray and move it to somebody else's in tray. And that was a business process that worked. However, he describes that when he left the workplace, that rather than being an in tray and an out tray, he had a PC that was sitting on his desk. That PC on his desk had an ERP, it had a CRM system, all the information he needed for his work was directly there. However, if we think about where we are now from a digital process in a car sense, if we think about a Tesla and the way that that has actually disrupted the entire supply chain, whether that's the way that dealerships work or whether that's the way that servicing works, all of the data from that vehicle is then centrally transmitted constantly to be able to then understand what's happening across that vehicle set. And when we think about digital transformation, it's really focused around these four key areas. And we've touched on some of them already. How do you transform products, optimize operations, empower employees, and finally, engage customers more effectively? So if we look at some of the technology that was announced recently and really distilling that down through the lens that we've just looked at about how do we solve and then meet the individual business challenge, but also how do we then empower IT to be more effective? And the first of those is Azure Arc. So Azure Arc provides us the ability to then run workload anywhere. And you'll see this is a common theme through a number of the updates that we provide in today's session. But what Azure Arc allows us to do is allows us to then manage a particular workload no matter what cloud that sits on, whether that's on Azure, whether that's on a partner cloud, whether that's actually on-prem, or whether that's on another cloud such as GCP or AWS. So what Azure Arc does is provides us a single pane of glass in order to be able to choose to run that workload wherever it makes sense. That allows us then to easily then pick up a workload and burst that out to cloud and potentially burst that back on-prem. But it also allows us then to be able to run specific capability that sits inside of a container. So Kubernetes allows us to then go and take a particular workload and deploy that directly inside of a container that can be migrated. And Azure Arc then provides that seamless experience to enable organizations to rapidly modernize their data center, but also be able to take advantage of hybrid capability, but also be able to then choose where it makes sense to run a particular workload. It also removes the cloud lock-in. So it allows you to then leverage whichever cloud makes sense, but doing that through one single pane of glass that allows you to see your IT operations holistically, no matter where that they're running. And a great example of that is the announcements of the GA of Azure SQL. Azure SQL can now run anywhere. So when we think about the traditional SQL Server environment, you think about SQL Server running on Windows, running on a particular VM or on bare metal or potentially in an IaaS environment. However, now with then Azure SQL, we can choose to run that anywhere. That could even be run directly on another cloud or picked up and moved back on-prem or picked up and directly moved back out to the cloud again. So what that means is we get to choose where we want to run those services. We get to choose about how we potentially push those out to the edge. We might have a burst capability where we all of a sudden need to have more compute and more data resources closer to the edge, but also then allows us to then collapse that environment when we no longer have a requirement directly for that. But that unified management is also not just designed for Azure SQL. It's also designed for PostgreSQL, as well as a number of other RDS databases that will start to come through. But when we talk about Arc and the ability to actually have that transportability and manageability, it's not just SQL Server and it's not just the database. when we think about Azure Arc and what it provides us, it also provides us the ability to then run integrations, for example. We can now run logic apps, so our iPaaS solution, so our integration platform as a service, we can choose where we want to run that. What that also means is that organisations can future-proof their existing investments. There are many organisations for various different reasons that aren't quite ready to adopt public cloud. That might be regulatory, where the regulatory authorities are slow to catch up and approve and authorise. It might be around security of particular data and where that needs to reside. Or it might be that the organisation still has existing IT assets that they're looking to continue to sweat before they then transform and move that out to public cloud. By using Azure Arc, it allows you to then leverage all of the flexibility and capability that cloud provides, but be able to develop a modern platform that can run wherever you choose. We're seeing organizations today that are deploying logic apps on-premise with Azure functions inside of Kubernetes that allows them to then build with a modern development environment that means that when they're ready to migrate to the cloud, they can take advantage of that and they've future-proof their existing investments, meaning that when they're ready to adopt, they can simply move the container that that workload sits in and continue to use Azure Arc to provide that same operational experience, meaning that their teams that support that environment are learning the new skills that they need now, and they don't need to relearn as they start to transition. So really starting to think about how that hybrid environment allows you to choose the cloud on your own terms. The other interesting change we're seeing is around the gravity of applications. We know that in Australia alone, that around 30% of SQL Server instances are running on legacy versions, which also means that Windows is also running on legacy versions as well. But often there's a number of different reasons for that gravity, whether it's the application's not supported in there, maybe the application's going to be retired because it's going to be moved to SaaS, maybe it's in the concept of being re-platformed and pulled apart into a microservice architecture that's then going to be redeployed directly inside of Azure. What's recently been announced is extended security updates. The extended security updates are not only for Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2, so extended support for those will then finish on 2023. But what that allows us to then do is then get an additional 3 years of extended support when you migrate that workload to Azure. So once that workload is lifted and shifted, we take the existing VM and actually V to V it, or we take the physical environment and P to V it directly inside of an IaaS environment. It allows you to take advantage of that 3 years of additional support there, which buys organizations time. They can retire the existing assets on-prem and start to then take advantage of some of the cloud capability, but doing that knowing that the environment is secure. One of the challenges of when extended support finishes for on-prem workloads is no longer having access to security updates. By migrating that workload to Azure, it allows you to take advantage of that. But one of the exciting announcements, though, was also the announcement around 2008, both from a SQL Server perspective, but also a Windows perspective. And that's the ability that that existing 3 years of extended support that many organisations have been taking advantage of has been continued for 1 more year, buying you time to then think about what the best way is for you to be able to transform your existing environment and take advantage of all of the cloud capability there with the extended security updates there. One of the other exciting features that were announced also was around app governance. And more we're wanting to then be able to then understand a particular application and understand the risks that are associated with that, but also ensuring that particular application behaviour is then within what we would normally expect to see, especially as we start to see more and more of a threat coming through with capability that's coming through with then being able to actually have supply chain attacks and other attack vectors. What app governance allows us to then do is securely deploy an application inside of then the Microsoft Cloud Application Security and have a security broker over the top of that that allows us to gain visibility into how that application is being used, but also be able to then ensure that we're protecting all of the sensitive assets that we have directly across the environment there. So continue to increase our security posture, but also providing that flexibility to allow organizations to then deploy applications securely and then continue to monitor the usage of how they're used over time and understand early any particular behavior that then is not known and be able to surface that up through that single pane of glass. And for those organizations that haven't started to look at Azure Sentinel as a SIEM, all of this data then gets surfaced into one compliance center that allows you to have a view across all of the security events across the entire business. But what you'll see that Microsoft is doing from the investments is realizing that organizations don't just have one cloud. They have multiple cloud, but also IT assets across different locations. But what you need is a seamless way to be able to then look at however those assets are being deployed. And that's another reason why app governance becomes so important. So one of the things that we're seeing around Microsoft Teams is, there's been massive adoption over the last 18 months with well over 200 million active usages on a monthly basis at the moment there. Now, when you start to think about that in terms, it's a massive amount of people that are using Teams on a daily basis. But Microsoft Teams is more than just simply a modern collaboration tool. Teams is becoming the new operating system. It's becoming the way that we go about deploying applications, whether that's embedding Power BI directly into Teams, whether it's being able to take a Power App and surface that up directly through Teams, or whether it's through the marketplace that allows many third-party applications to be surfaced in that. By being able to surface those applications directly inside of Teams, it means that there's less context switching. Rather than having to shell out and move to another application, we then just have one central interface as a knowledge worker to see all of the tools that I need to be able to get my job done directly inside of that interface. But the other part of Teams is the ability to also extend the existing capability. So being able to take a meeting experience and embed an application directly inside of that meeting, or being able to bring up a report that's specific to the people that I'm talking to in that meeting there. So as we think about Teams becoming that new operating system and deploying that unified experience for all of our applications, there's also a need for us then to think about how we broaden the adoption and use of data across the organisation to really make it easy to disseminate that information and everybody consuming that. So one of the announcements that were made was the ability for then anyone using Microsoft Teams to have access to view and edit Microsoft Dynamics 365 data directly in Teams at no additional cost. That allows that broad adoption of the Dynamics 365 capability, but also allows you to then choose when you need to go and purchase a license and remove those barriers to productivity directly inside of the workforce there, all through that one central user interface. Look, the last announcement that we want to talk about is really about Windows 365. And I think Windows 365 is probably one of the most exciting announcements that came out of the recent event with Microsoft. And really, this is a brand new way of thinking about computing. And really, it's a brand new category. Really, we're thinking about this as a cloud PC. So we've had desktop virtualization for a long time, but really what Windows 365 is the ability for us to then deliver a full high fidelity Windows experience as a cloud service. So effectively allowing our desktop to be streamed to us on any device, whether that's a Google Chromebook, whether that's on an iPad, or whether that's on a traditional Surface device. But it also means that I have that same desktop experience that follows me wherever I go. I might go and use a high-powered laptop while I'm working from home, but as a field worker, I might then turn to a low form factor device while I'm actually out in the field. So I can have a document, leave it open directly on my screen at home, and then be able to stream that exact experience no matter where I am in the world to be able to have that same unified experience. So the access to have a full high fidelity desktop, including Windows and all of the applications that are deployed on that, that allows me to then go and consume that anywhere. It also helps solve some of those challenges, especially where traditionally I might go and use E1 for a kiosk worker that might actually just need access to email and might need access to other capability, but also for organisations that have highly scalable workforces where I need to be able to provision them compute for a period of time, but then I need to be able to then collapse that environment when there's no longer a need for that utilising. So this has actually snuck up on a lot of people, Windows 365. It's now available in GA, so you can actually now go and start to purchase this and start to use it. It allows you to then not only experience Windows 10, but also then ready for Windows 11 as that starts to roll out across there. So the ability to be able to have that flexibility of streaming a full fidelity experience no matter where you are starts to really change the way that we think about consuming compute, but also thinking about changing the way that we think about deploying devices to people, especially in a remote working scenario that many of us are still working through at the moment. But as we start to think about the changes, though, that are occurring from a technology perspective, one of the other big changes that's also happening is the way that organisations then consume then from a licensing perspective. So Shannon's now going to walk us through what some of those changes are from a licensing perspective and how you as an organisation then continue to then justify the ROI and ensure that you're not overcapitalising on your investment and really paying for what you need there. So over to you, Shannon.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, everyone. So my name is Shannon Hadley. I'm the Microsoft lead at MOQdigital, Microsoft licensing. And so you may have heard that MOQ has recently become a direct CSP provider, which we really think helps allow our customers to go the next step with MOQ with their licensing. So, which really begs the question, what can CSPs now provide? So a lot's changed in the last 12 months. Not only can a CSP resell cloud subscriptions, but we're able to resell perpetual software like Open and software subscriptions like Windows Server and SQL. The great thing about the latter is a lot of the rights are similar to those offered under software assurance, like disaster recovery and hybrid use benefits. And they can be valuable to customers that are really just starting out their journey with the cloud, as well as customers that are a bit more mature. So we'll just jump to the next slide. Cool, thanks. So the key to remember is compared to other agreement types, CSP under our direct model gives us better buying power, which allows us to remain competitive with larger engagements, and scalable solutions. So this really enables us to build a solution that enables customers to spend for what they use without the commitment and the upfront cost. In addition to CSP standard benefits of a PAYG model, there's also flexible billing. So we can do monthly, annually, and soon we'll be able to do quarterly billing. And next. Which is great, but why MOQ? So to start with, we believe the things that set MOQ apart from the rest are the following. So cost optimization. So we can do regular reviews with you and help our customers optimize their spend with the help of our custom consulting services support. So as part of our reseller agreement, we must provide at least a tier 1 pass-through service, but we can also provide additional proactive services with you, the customer, to ensure that you're getting the full value of your services. And one consolidated bill. So you'll receive one bill from MOQdigital with all of your Azure spend, as opposed to a bill for every Microsoft agreement that you hold. And in addition to this, we can also provide free value adds like secure score, migration workshops, again, software optimization services, and Teams assessments, etc. And I think those are just pretty much the high-level views as to what CSP with MOQ can provide for you. And if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll share my contact details at the end of this to have a chat.
Fantastic. Thanks, Shannon, for that insight. So, look, I think you'll agree that there's a lot changing from a technology landscape perspective. That technology is changing not only from the way that we go and deploy and the way that we go and consume services, but it's also changing the way that we go about procuring those as well. For many organisations, you'd be familiar with the traditional Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. It's a construct that you've probably been very familiar with for many, many years. But as you move more and more to a consumption-based world, it's ensuring that not only your technology is fit for purpose, but also the licensing construct that you have is fit for purpose as well. So to help organisations unlock the value of not only their existing IT investments, but also their existing IT licensing, we're actually offering a complimentary half-day digital estate assessment. That digital estate assessment is to help you understand what your existing landscape looks like and also provide you what the options are for you to be able to have a pathway to move forward, but also one that's then specific for your own organisation. Be able to look at some of the announcements that are making and some of the forward-facing horizon and how you too can adopt those as well. So thanks, everyone. I'll open the floor now to any questions. So I think one of the questions that is come through in the chat is specifically around Dynamics 365, and is MOQdigital able to then be able to provide support for the Dynamics 365 platform? So as part of MOQ's business applications platform, we actually have the capability to be able to then help organisations deploy and also customise their Dynamics 365 environment. But we also have a managed service that allows that to be supported 24/7 as well, as Dynamics 365 is really starting to become the core nucleus for many organisations, whether that's through the adoption of Dataverse, whether that's through the adoption of then that central nucleus that then radiates out that customer-centric view directly from that. So if anyone would like to know more about how MOQdigital can help support or implement your Dynamics 365 environment, feel free to reach out after the session. We'd love to have a chat